Welcome back. You're still watching Market View. With Eswatini continuing to feel the effects of climate change, businesses can play their part in preserving the environment. Business journalist Nilsi Amanda sat down with the CEO of the Eswatini Environment Authority, Gcina Dladla, to find out which environment laws businesses should look out for. Second-hand tire businesses will have to be on the lookout as the authority notices that they are not disposed in a way that preserves the environment.
CEO, welcome to Market View. It is quite evident that Eswatini is starting to feel the effects of climate change. I just want to know and understand the regulations, especially the environmental regulations that businesses operating in Eswatini should comply with.
Yeah, the environment space, for obvious reasons, because when you talk of environment, at the heart of that conversation is human health, then what obtains in the natural environment. And as such, it's one of those highly regulated areas or spaces, not only at the country level, but at the global level. That's why when you talk of what you call multilateral environmental agreements, we have more than 20 of these agreements, many of which Eswatini is party to. And as a country, since the 1992 Rio Convention, Eswatini has actually enacted several legislations which seeks to protect the environment. And many of these legislations do apply to the private sector, do apply to business. We do have the framework legislation which we call the Environmental Management Act of 2002, which has come with several other regulations. We have regulations that are looking at water pollution. We have several pieces of legislation that are dealing with waste. We have legislations that looks at air pollution, the smoke that you usually see, which we call stuck emissions monitoring. We have legislations on that. We have several legislations that are looking at chemicals and waste, as I've said. And we do have many other policy documents that seeks to then guide the country in terms of how issues of environmental management in Eswatini should be governed. But I must also underline the point that our very constitution, the constitution of the Kingdom of Eswatini, puts the issue of environmental stewardship at the apex of our responsibilities as a Maswati, whether we are individuals, whether we are entities of the state, or even private sector or business citizens. So these are issues that we expect every Liswati, particularly those in business, to comply, not only because of the consequences that usually come with non-compliance, but just purely because we expect our business community to be good citizens and good stewards.
Having touched on these regulations, CEO, how well do you monitor them to ensure compliance?
Yeah, you know, the issue of compliance it has always been an elusive issue for many reasons. But I must say that we have seen quite some improvement in the recent past, largely because I think institutions such as financial institutions who finance a lot of these business ventures and initiatives do now put the issue of the environment as one of those important pillars of not only compliance, but as a key performance pillar for businesses. So I think that to a certain extent has really facilitated a process where you see more and more businesses complying to these environmental legislations. But we still do have challenges, particularly challenges that are related to the lack of investments by businesses in terms of putting money in environmental compliance related issues. You find that still businesses want to take shortcuts, still want to evade state entities like us and those that are charged with the responsibility of ensuring that businesses do comply. So we still do have those challenges. That's why you would find that we still have a problem with waste management. We still have a problem with water pollution, largely as a result of discharge of solid and liquid waste by some business entities. But then our mandate as the environment authorities to make sure that we monitor those things through inspections, planned or scheduled inspections, and some unplanned, random, surprise inspections, so that those culprits then can be brought to book. We usually don't want to take the confrontational approach. We prefer working together with businesses to achieve compliance. But when a push comes to a shove, we are left with no other option but just to trigger those legislative provisions and by imposing those necessary fines so that a business can take these issues seriously.
You are touching on the issue of fines. How much can a business be fined if they do not follow these regulations?
You know, the sad part about environmental contraventions is that we can never look at the amounts of fines that we impose as something that can be equated to the long-term impact or damage that a simple discharge of a toxic chemical into the environment may cause to communities, to the country, to the economy. So although the legislation has provisions which may probably put a maximum fine of probably say 250,000 emalangeni for a violation of any kind, we don't take that as something that can, even if somebody is fined and found guilty by the court of law, we never find that as something that can be equated to the long-term impacts. As you would know that many pollutants that end up in the environment, if they are not properly managed, they can cause all sorts of ailments. They can destroy entire ecosystems. They can cause extinction of species. They can lead to long-term chronic ailments to communities. So these are things that we always try to impress when we engage private sector, as we emphasize the importance of compliance and emphasize the importance of making sure that we don't just say, if I have the 250,000, I'll just pollute and pay the money and get away with it. That's not the spirit and the approach that we want, but we want to make sure that all citizens, particularly the business community, do take the issues of environment seriously.
With the current environmental changes brought by climate change, CEO, I'm interested to know if there are any changes to the laws that businesses should be on the lookout for, especially in order for them to better preserve the environment.
So as a country, as Eswatini, we are definitely going to have some of those policy developments, particularly to deal with the issue of plastics. I know that there are still some conversations in Parliament regarding some of the initiatives that government has taken, like the total ban of certain plastic polymers. But I think where we are headed now, we're headed to an era where we will require that we have a conversation around the principle of what to call extended producer responsibility, which simply says anyone who produces any type of material must have an extended responsibility to make sure that the life cycle management of that product doesn't harm the environment. If you are a producer, for instance, of car batteries or car tires, or even nappies, which is one of the big problems we have, somehow the country must be able to hold you responsible for a product up to the end of life or end of use of that product, so that we avoid a situation where end of life of these products become more problematic for the country. As I speak right now, we have a huge second-hand tire industry in the country. Many of these tires, you'll use them maybe for 3 months, you need a new replacement. The question is, what happens to those tires? A lot of people, you find them burning them and causing more problems. Some of them, they are dumped in dongas. So these are things that we need to deal with. So the extended producer responsibility framework is one of those things that we will be engaging the private sector with, and I hope that this is going to assist. And we want this to be private sector driven, so that it is not seen as one of those government initiatives of getting whatsoever extra tax from the private sector. But we want this to be private sector driven, to be led by the private sector, so that we can solve the problem, particularly of waste management in the country.
I am glad you have touched on the issue of second-hand tires, CEO, because I saw a business expert on social media complaining that it seems like other countries are now disposing their tires in Eswatini. But as a parting shot, I want you to talk to different businesses on how they can comply with the different environmental regulations.
Yeah, you see, I think business today is in a much better position really to comply with environment standards or legislation, whether you talk national legislation and global legislation, which comes in the form of these treaties, conventions, and protocols which a country like the Kingdom of Eswatini is party to. Largely because there is so much voluntary standards that businesses can adopt through standards that are going to guide environmental policies for companies, and then by so doing, have planned deliberate actions that are going to assist businesses to comply. So that guidance alone puts many businesses in a better position really to comply. That's why we work very closely with our sister entities like the Eswatini Standards Authority, who are the ones who develop some of the standards. Some of the standards that we usually emphasize and recommend from the environment point of view are standards like the ISO 14,000 family of standards, where businesses can be sort of guided, step-by-step guidance in terms of how do you, as a small, medium enterprise, develop your small environment policy, which says how we are going to take care of the environment as a small, upcoming entity, so that whether you grow big or you grow small, you don't find yourself on the other side of the law.
Thank you so much, CEO, for joining us on the program. This has been a very insightful conversation. We are hoping that business people and businesses that are coming in to invest in Eswatini will understand that they have to comply with all the environmental policies, not only those of the country, but their international ones.
All right, so that was EA Executive Director Gcina Dlala speaking on the roles businesses can play to preserve the environment. After the break, we connect with Sanellis Via for today's financial markets. Stay with us.